Noah Osei had not spoken a single word in 2 years, 3 months, and 19 days. His pediatric speech therapist had a file on him 3 inches thick. His preschool teacher kept a chart on the wall, tracking sounds, approximations, anything. The chart had 4 entries, all of them nonverbal. Marcus had stopped counting the days sometime around month 14 because counting made it a contest, and it was not a contest. His son was 4 years old, and the last word he had spoken, clearly and without prompting, was "Mama," and he had said it on the morning of October 9th, 2 years and nearly 4 months ago, standing at the kitchen window in his pajamas, watching the ambulance pull away. He had not spoken since. Marcus kept the speech therapist's appointments. He kept the chart. He kept showing up, which was the only thing he knew how to do reliably. He had no idea that at 4:47 on a Tuesday afternoon, his son was going to walk across a waiting room, climb into the lap of a woman he had never met, press his face into her shoulder, and say one word. The word was going to be "Mommy." The room was going to go completely silent, and the woman was going to stop breathing for a moment that lasted longer than any moment has a right to last. Because she had been running from that word for 17 years, and she had run straight into it. She was already sitting in the chair. Her heels were on the cold tile. Her hands were in her lap and completely still, which they almost never were. Marcus Osei had built custom metalwork for 11 years out of a workshop on Aldine Street that smelled of flux and iron filings and the particular mineral cold of concrete in winter. The workshop occupied the ground floor of a building his mother had helped him buy 7 years ago, before the accident, when there were 2 incomes and the future was something you could plan toward. On the fabrication table that Tuesday morning, 4 panels of architectural screen destined for the new federal courthouse renovation in the 9th District. Each panel, a 6x4 grid of hand-punched copper, with a pattern derived from a Ghanaian Adinkra symbol that the building's architect had found in a book and sent to Marcus with a note that said simply, "Can you do this?" He could. He had spent 3 evenings working out the punch sequence, and by Tuesday morning the pattern was emerging from the copper, the way patterns emerge when someone who knows what they are doing is patient enough to let them come. On the pegboard above the fabrication table, a letter from the Department of the Interior, confirming delivery of the decorative ironwork panels Marcus had fabricated for the restoration of a 19th-century federal building in Savannah, Georgia. Beside it, pinned without ceremony, a photograph of those panels installed, floor to ceiling in the rotunda, catching the afternoon light the way iron catches light when it has been worked by someone who understands it. On the workbench itself, tucked under the edge of the flux tin so it wouldn't slide, a folded technical drawing on GSA specification paper, its scale notations and federal stamp visible at the corner. The kind of document that does not belong in a metalworking shop unless the person in that shop has been somewhere else before this. Noah sat on a wooden stool in the corner of the workshop with a picture book open on his lap and the small tin box on the stool beside him. The tin was olive drab and had a hinged lid that latched with a small hook, and inside it was a photograph. His mother had put it there the morning she left for the last time, telling him the tin kept things safe. She had been right about the tin. Noah carried it the way other children carried stuffed animals, not clutching it, just keeping it near, checking periodically that the latch was closed. He had his father's stillness. He was 4 years old and had his father's way of being present in a room without requiring anything from it. The ticking clock was in Marcus's email, which he had not opened yet that morning because opening it first thing made the day start wrong. The note on the Aldine Street property had been called 11 days ago by Fenn & Associates on behalf of their investment client. citing a covenant violation Marcus's original attorney had apparently missed, and his new attorney described, with professional understatement, as aggressive. $287,000. 11 days remaining on the cure period. After that, the building, the workshop, the fabrication table, the copper panels for the federal courthouse, Noah's stool in the corner, the photograph of the Savannah Rotunda on the pegboard would belong to whoever Fenn and Associates represented, and Marcus would be starting over, which was something he was not sure he had enough left to do. He dressed Noah in the blue jacket. He put the tin in Noah's jacket pocket. He drove to the Crane Infrastructure Partners building on Broad Street for a 3 o'clock meeting he had not requested and did not yet understand. Carrying under his arm a portfolio of fabrication specifications for a pedestrian bridge project he had submitted 6 weeks ago and heard nothing about since. Sylvie Crane had been CEO of Crane Infrastructure Partners for 4 years, and she had built the firm into a municipal bond advisory with $4.2 billion in active engagements by doing one thing consistently. She outworked every person who underestimated her, and she never stopped to let them apologize for it. That Tuesday morning, she had closed a $1.1 billion municipal bond offering for the West Side Transit Authority, 17 months of negotiations, 3 collapsed term sheets, 1 complete restructuring of the collateral package, and she had done it by 10:15 a.m., at which point she returned to her desk and started on the afternoon's work, because there was always afternoon's work. She ate lunch at her desk. She did not take calls that were not in her calendar. She moved through the day the way she had been moving through days for 17 years, fast enough that the thing she was not thinking about could not catch her. The thing she was not thinking about was a child she had not seen since the morning of his birth, when she was 23 years old, and alone in a way she had chosen and had regretted and had never been still enough to fully grieve. She did not know if he was healthy. She did not know if he was loved. She knew only that he existed somewhere in the world, and that she had given him the only protection she could manage at the time, which was someone else's home and someone else's love, and that she had been moving ever since in the direction of earning the right to that decision. She had not yet arrived. She was not sure the place existed. At 3 o'clock she walked into the main lobby conference room to meet the fabricator who had submitted the pedestrian bridge specifications. She sat at the side of the table, not the head. She had her portfolio and her notes. She had not expected a child. Marcus came through the door with Noah at his side, Noah's hand in his, the tin box latched in his jacket pocket. Marcus set his portfolio on the table and looked at Sylvie and said, "I apologize. The sitter fell through. He can sit quietly. He's very good at quiet." Sylvie said, "It's fine." She looked at Noah. He was looking at her. He was looking at her the way children look when they have found something that makes no sense to them, and they are trying to resolve it by looking harder. She had a particular quality of stillness when she held her hands in her lap, a specific way of carrying her shoulders, not rigid but contained, the posture of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has gotten so used to the weight that she no longer adjusts for it. Noah stood in the doorway with his father's hand around his and looked at her, and his expression did something she could not interpret. She said to Marcus, "Please, sit down." Marcus began to sit. Noah did not. Noah walked forward, across the conference room toward Sylvie's chair, and Marcus said his name quietly, one syllable, a question, but Noah kept walking. He reached her chair. He climbed into her lap without asking. The way children do things they have decided are simply true. And he pressed his face into her shoulder. She did not move. Her hands went to his back, automatically, before she decided to move them. She looked at Marcus across the table. Marcus was standing. His face was doing something she did not know what to call. Noah said into her shoulder, in a voice that had been missing for 2 years, 3 months, and 19 days, Mommy. The word was clear. It was not a question. It was not a mistake. It was the particular certainty of a 4-year-old who has recognized something true. Sylvie stopped breathing. The room stopped. Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them. His hands were flat on the table. He said, in a voice very low and very even, "Noah, come here." Noah pulled back from her shoulder and looked at her face. He studied it for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, unlatched the tin and took out the photograph. He held it up in front of her face with both hands, not offering it, showing it, the way you show someone proof. She looked at the photograph. It was a woman. The woman in the photograph had a specific quality of stillness in her hands, a particular way of carrying her shoulders. The photograph had been taken by someone standing close enough to catch her unguarded. Sylvie looked at the photograph for a long time. She said, quietly, "Where did he get this?" Marcus said, "It was his mother's." The room remained still. Noah looked at Sylvie's face. He was waiting for something with the patience of someone who has been waiting for a long time and has learned that patience is not the same as giving up. She reached out and took the photograph from him, carefully, with both hands. She turned it over. On the back, in blue pen, a date, a name she did not recognize, and a location, Aldine Street. She looked at Marcus. She said, "What was her name?" He said, "Adeze." "Ada. She died 2 years ago." "She didn't." He stopped. He said, "She didn't tell me much about before." Sylvie set the photograph on the table between them. Face up. She looked at it for another moment. Then she looked at Noah, who was still in her lap, who had not moved, who was watching her with complete and undemanding attention. She said to him, "You're very brave." Noah considered this. He tilted his head slightly, the way he tilted his head when he was deciding whether something was true. Then he reached up and patted her once on the collarbone, the way you pat something you intend to keep safe. He climbed down from her lap and went to his father. Sylvie sat in the chair. She did not stand up for a long moment. She was aware of the weight that was no longer in her lap, and of the handprint on her collarbone that was not visible but was there, and of the fact that she had just been comforted by a 4-year-old who had mistaken her for someone he needed, and that she had not wanted him to stop. Marcus looked at her from across the table. He did not speak. He put his hand on Noah's shoulder. The three of them held the quiet of the room together for a moment that none of them named. She said, "I'm sorry." She stopped. She said, "I'm not sure what just happened." Marcus said, "Neither am I." The meeting about the pedestrian bridge did not happen that afternoon. Marcus took Noah home at 4:30 and put him to bed early and sat in the workshop with the lights off for a long time. He was not thinking about the bridge specifications. He was not thinking about the foreclosure notice. He was thinking about what it means when a child who has not spoken in more than 2 years finds the word again, and what that child found to say it to, and the way that woman had sat in the chair for a moment after Noah left her lap, as though she was learning for the first time what it felt like to be in a room where something had been taken from her. He had just pulled up the foreclosure email on his phone for the first time that day when it buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. Sylvie said, "I need to tell you something. All of it. It's going to take some time." He said, "I'll be at the workshop." She drove to Aldine Street. He met her at the workshop door. They sat on 2 metal stools at the fabrication table with the copper panels around them, and she talked. And he let her talk. And the workshop was very quiet, except for her voice, and the sound of the city outside, and once the sound of Noah shifting in his sleep in the room above. When she had told him everything, she sat with her hands flat on the fabrication table and looked at the photograph between them and waited for whatever came next, which she had no ability to predict and no right to direct. She had spent 17 years moving fast enough to stay ahead of exactly this moment. The moment had been patient. She told him she had been 23 years old and alone and terrified in a way she had not understood yet as terrified because she had mistaken it for decision. She had placed the child, a son, through a private agency, a closed adoption, because she believed she had nothing to give him, which was a belief she had defended for 17 years by staying in motion. She described the morning she signed the papers the way people describe things they have memorized from having gone back to them in their minds so many times. Flat, exact, without drama, because drama would have been a kind of comfort, and she had decided long ago she didn't deserve comfort about this. She told him about the photograph. She had given one to the agency for the file, the only photograph she had of herself in the months after, the one a stranger had taken on Aldine Street, where she had stood for 20 minutes one afternoon trying to make herself go inside a building and failing. She had not known whose street it was. She had not known who lived there. She had not known until she looked at that photograph tonight and then looked at the name on Marcus's workshop door. That Ada Osei, the woman who had raised her son for 4 years, the woman whose name was on the back of the photograph in blue pen, had been the woman who adopted him. The closed adoption had been opened by Ada 3 years before she died. Ada had sought out Sylvie through the agency, had found her, had stood in the same place Sylvie had stood for 20 minutes on Aldine Street, and had not knocked. She had sent only the photograph, back through the agency, with her name and address on the back, and the agency had filed it. Sylvie had never been told. Noah was not seeing a stranger. He was seeing a face he knew from a photograph his mother had shown him, a photograph Ada had printed from the file and kept and shown to her son because she believed, in the way Ada apparently believed things, that he deserved to know every part of where he came from. Sylvie stopped talking. The workshop was quiet. Marcus was looking at the photograph, which she had brought with her and set on the fabrication table between them. He picked it up, he turned it over. He read the date and Ada's handwriting. He said after a long moment, "She never told me she found you." Sylvie said, "I know." He said, "That was Ada. She would have thought it wasn't her story to tell." He set the photograph down carefully. He said, "I'm sorry, I'm trying to." He stopped. He set whatever he was holding down on the table and did not pick it up again. They sat there for a while with all of it between them, which was a great deal, and neither of them tried to reduce it to something smaller than it was. At some point Marcus stood. He said, "Come with me." He said it the way he said most things, not an invitation exactly, not a command, just a direction stated simply, and with the expectation that direction was what was needed. He led her outside and drove her across the river to the Meridian Bridge. It was nearly midnight. The bridge was lit from below, and the river was dark and still, and the city was quiet in the way cities are quiet in the hour before anything begins again. He stood at the railing and looked at the water and did not say anything for a moment. He said, "I designed the original load amendment for this bridge. Not the bridge I came in after, when the initial design had a flaw in the expansion joint system that nobody had caught. I caught it. I filed the amendment. The contractor who lost the contract because of my amendment filed the licensing complaint against me 8 months later. They used documentation from Crane Infrastructure Partners Project Archive because they had access to it through your 2019 filings. I lost my license. I lost the engineering work. I started fabricating because I needed to keep the building and I knew how to work metal, and it turns out I was good at it, so I kept doing it. He looked at the bridge. The water moved below it, dark and steady, carrying whatever it carried. He said, "The bridge is still standing." I think about that. She stood beside him at the railing. She said, "I didn't know." About the complaint. About any of it. He said, "I know." She said, "Marcus." He said, "I know." He said it without anger, without reassurance, just as a fact, the way he stated most facts. He turned from the railing. He said, "Noah trusts things before he understands them. He always has." Ada said it was one of his best qualities, and one of the most dangerous ones. They stood for a moment on the bridge above the dark water. Sylvie said, "She sounds like she was remarkable." Marcus said, "She was." He said, "She would have liked you." He said it in the same quiet register as everything else. He was already walking back to the car. Garrett Fenn arrived the next morning uninvited. At 10, letting himself through the workshop's unlocked side door the way men who have never been refused entry let themselves through doors. He was 46, silver-haired, dressed in the particular way of someone who wants you to know exactly what his suit cost. And he had a habit. Before he spoke in any room where something was at stake, he removed his watch, a chronograph, steel and gold, and set it on the nearest flat surface, as if depositing time itself as collateral. He did it now, setting the watch on the edge of the fabrication table, beside the copper panels for the federal courthouse, and he looked at Marcus with the measured patience of a man who believes the patience is a courtesy. He said, "I'm going to offer you 30 days on the cure period. I'd hate for things to get complicated." Marcus was standing at the fabrication table. He did not look up from the panel he was examining. He said, "The Stratford Capital account administered under Fenn and Associates received 3 wire transfers between May and December of last year. The total was $340,000. The authorization blocks on each transfer carried Crane Infrastructure Partners 2021 compliance signature format, a format your firm obtained when you were appointed document custodian for the Meridian River Bridge closing. The source funds were redirected municipal bond escrow from 3 different closings. The redirects were flagged in a compliance audit Crane Infrastructure filed in January. That audit report is currently being reviewed by the State Financial Crimes Unit, which received its copy 11 days ago." He set down the panel. He reached under the workbench and brought up a file folder. He said, "The original licensing complaint against me. The one filed in 2021 that cost me my engineering license. Used documentation from Crane Infrastructure Partners 2019 project archive. Your firm filed the complaint on behalf of the contractor. The documentation was fabricated. The original source materials are in this folder, with a forensic comparison commissioned by a former colleague of mine at the Federal Courthouse project. He did it as a favor. He sent a copy to the State Licensing Board yesterday morning." Fenn had not moved toward his watch. He was standing very still, looking at the folder. He said, "Marcus, let's be reasonable about." Sylvie Crane walked through the side door. She set her own folder on the fabrication table beside Marcus's. She said, "Good morning, Garrett." He looked at her. The watch was on the table between them. He looked at it and then looked at her, and something in his face reassembled itself into a shape that was not quite the one he had walked in wearing. She said, "The State Financial Crimes Unit has a full copy of the Stratford account records. The licensing board has the forensic comparison. The Federal Courthouse Project Office has been notified that the lead fabricator on their contract is operating under a fraudulent compliance history. I called them this morning." She looked at him for a moment. She said, You can take your watch and go. Or you can wait here for the investigators, who are due at 11. Ben looked at the watch. He reached for it. His hand closed around it, without the adjustment, without the ritual. Just the reaching and the closing, and a man who looked smaller than he had when he walked in. He picked up the watch. He said nothing. He walked to the side door, and opened it, and stepped through without looking back, and the door swung shut behind him on its pneumatic hinge, closing slowly and completely, with the soft, terminal sound of pressurized air finding its seal. Marcus stood at the fabrication table. He was looking at the copper panels, at the Adinkra pattern emerging from the copper in the morning light, punch by punch, the way things emerge when someone does not stop. Sylvie stood beside him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. He said, "How did you get the forensic comparison?" She said, "I asked the right questions of the right people. You have a former colleague who thinks very highly of you." He said, "Kwame," she said. "He said to tell you the bridge is still standing." Marcus looked at the panels. He set his hand flat on the surface of one of them, not examining the joint this time, just resting it there. His hand was still. She said, "Marcus." He looked at her. She said, "I want to be in his life. I don't know what that looks like yet. I need you to know that I'm not running anymore." He held her gaze for a moment. He said, "He chose you before I did." He picked up the panel. He said, "I think that probably counts for something." 8 months later, Noah Osei was in the first grade and had an attendance record that his teacher described as perfect. He spoke in full sentences. He still carried the tin, but now there were 2 photographs inside it, the original and a newer one that he had insisted on having printed, of the 3 of them standing on the Meridian River Bridge at dusk, the river going silver below them. Sylvie's hand near Marcus's hand on the railing, both of them looking at Noah, who was looking at the camera with the brass latch of the tin box hooked over one finger. The workshop had a new federal contract on the fabrication table, a rail system for the same courthouse, referred by the architect who had sent the Adinkra note. The licensing complaint had been formally vacated and expunged in month 3. The Aldine Street building was still his. Noah's second-grade teacher had already requested a parent meeting. She wanted to talk about the possibility of a gifted program. Sylvie had dinner at Aldine Street on Wednesdays. She arrived with groceries, and she stayed long enough to read to Noah before bed. 2 books, his choice, always. And then she sat with Marcus at the fabrication table, and they talked the way people talk when they are finally in a place where there is enough time for the real conversation. She was learning, slowly, what it felt like to stop moving. It felt like a room she had been standing outside of for a long time, and like the room was warmer than she had expected. Noah had not used the word again since the waiting room. He did not need to. He had already pointed true north. The tin was in his jacket pocket. The latch was closed. He knew where he was. If you know someone who has spent years running from the one room they needed to walk into, share this with them. Some things wait. Some people do too. Subscribe if this is the kind of story you want to keep finding here. Here's the question I need you to answer in the comments. And I need the honest answer. If a child who had never met you looked at your face and said the one word you have been running from for years, would you stay in that chair? Or would you find a reason to stand up and leave? Tell me what you would actually do. We read every one,